Good. Okay, good. All right.
Okay, is everybody ready for round two? Welcome tonight, Dr. Marzek. We appreciate you being here with us.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
If you will, I understand you have, there's no family members with you tonight.
Yes, ma'am.
So you want to tell us a little bit about your family and why they're not with you?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Not a problem. So my wife and I have been married since 1995. Met in Clarksville, Tennessee. We have 4 girls, 2 7th graders, rising 8th graders. They're twins, identical twin girls. Luckily, we had that first, and everything was easy after that. I have also a 4th grader who's a rising 5th grader, and a 1st grader, rising 2nd grader. The reason they're not here is that Tuesday, my daughter's placed in the 3200 for the regional track meet. So they have practice tonight, and then tomorrow are the regionals, hopefully moving on to state.
3,200 meters?
3,200 meters, 2 miles, exactly. Well, my wife and I, consequently, we run mini marathons, so it just falls in the blood, if you will. So they're good.
I'm glad someone's doing it.
Yeah. So Maxine and Zoe push each other. They placed 1st and 2nd place in the 3,200 on Tuesday. So looking to place 1st and 2nd again, and 1st and 2nd in the state.
That's awesome. Before we get started, Mr. Hickman is one of our very first original school board members. Mr. Hickman, would you please raise your hand? Came last night, and I failed last night to introduce Dr. Reese, our interim superintendent, is here, and I think for the most part, outside of a handful of community members, these are all educators that are in our school district.
Beautiful.
So,
Excellent.
is there anything I can...
Just for me, thank you for coming out. Appreciate it. Excellent. I mean, you could be home eating dinner right now.
Is there anything you need before we get started?
No, ma'am. I'm ready to rock and roll.
Okay. As we mentioned last night, the 15 questions that the board and our Hoover Parent Teacher Committee came up with, those questions were sent to you several days ago.
Yes, ma'am.
So you should be prepared to answer the questions, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Not a problem. I'm ready to go.
Okay. Mr. Presley, we'll start with you tonight, please.
Thank you, Ms. Rager. Dr. Marzak, again, welcome to Hoover, and thank you for being here tonight. Why are you interested in leading the Hoover City Schools?
That's a good question. Mr. Presley, after looking at your data and reading everything online, I think the better question is, who wouldn't be interested in coming to Hoover City Schools? This is a phenomenal school system. I mean, just consequently, I've done research on U5. I can't find any bickering, I can't find any arguing, I can't find any disagreement, which tells me, first off, that you're a great school board. And that's one of the dreams of every superintendent, is to work for a great school board. So obviously what I think happens is kind of like what happens in Oak Ridge with our board. Behind the scenes, you may disagree, you may conversate, you may discuss, but when you come out here in front of the public eye, you present yourself as a united front. And to me, that tells me that you're a great board, and only great boards can lead great school systems. I've been doing a lot of research about Hoover City. Your Hoover High School has an ACT average of 22.7. Spain Park's average is 23.9. Your district average is 23.2. You've undergone some population shifts in the last 5 years, yet you've been able to maintain an ACT composite above 23 in Spain Park and 22. You have a great schools rating of 7.875 out of 10. That tells me that your teachers brag about this system online, and that releases such great scores in grade schools. I also looked at you have a niche ranking number 3 in the state. That's pretty good, considering all of the schools that you have and the academics that are taking place and the number of students you have. To be ranked number 3 in the state is really good. And I'm just going to call out Miss Minette R. Wiggins at Trace Crossings, one of the final 4 teachers of the year in the state of Alabama. That doesn't happen if greatness is not around. So I wanted to tell her, if she's listening, congratulations, because I know that's not easy to do. And consequently, just like I said before about my 4 children, this is a great system to put them in. I know I read online that one of the things that you said is that the children of the superintendent didn't necessarily have to attend Hoover City Schools. For me, it's a mandatory, because I don't want to offer an education for any children that are not my children or not good enough for them. So they will be coming to Hoover City Schools if I get the honor of getting this job. But there are a couple things that I do want to improve upon. First, I want an ACT composite of 27 in each of the 2 high schools. Secondly, I want a niche ranking of #1 in the state, and I want a great schools rating of 10 out of 10. Because from what I've read, we can be the #1 school system in the state of Alabama. We've got to work together, we've got to do some intentional stuff, but we can get there, and I can help get you there.
Can I have a follow-up question, please?
Yes, sir.
From your resume, I noticed that you are currently an assistant superintendent.
Yes, sir.
How do you feel that's going to parlay you into the position of superintendent for our schools?
The work that we've done in Oak Ridge, and the work that I've done as the assistant superintendent, and the work that I consequently did in Nashville, Tennessee, is primed to help Hoover become #1 in the state of Alabama. The work that we're doing right now is being intentional for all children. Oak Ridge has had some demographic shifts over the last 5 years. A lot of people don't realize that Oak Ridge is now 52% free and reduced lunch, yet we have an ACT composite above 23. So what we do is we get intentional with children, and we provide them activities that specifically and directly impact their academic success. I want to bring what we've done at Oak Ridge and what I've done in Nashville to Hoover City Schools. Now, does that mean that I'm going to come in, if I get the job in the first 6 months and fruit basket turnover, I don't like this, I don't like that? No. Because I have a lot of ideas, but I don't have a lot of the answers. So what I've got to do is I've got to come in and listen, I've got to find out what's working well, and I've got to find out what we can tweak to make it work even better. Because what we have in the room behind us are some phenomenal educators. And what they need to do is they need to be supported. And they need to be discussed with, and they need to be talked to, and they need to be respected. Because obviously what they're doing is good, but can we tweak it to make it a little bit better? And that's what I'll talk about a little bit later on when we start talking about keeping Hoover City at high academics. I have some specifics for you.
Let me piggyback on what you just said. When I look at your, really, your kind of open letter to the board as well.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Frazier. Superintendent in charge of curriculum instruction, student services, special ed, professional development, IT, the budget over $48 million.
Yes, sir.
We have people and staff in each one of those entities. Now,
Yeah.
I assume that what you've done at Oak Ridge, you can be able to correlate it and bring and perhaps add value.
Yes, sir.
We have a high level of competency. And what I think is important is for the superintendent to take that staff that's in place, and that competency that we've got, and like you say, parlay that into, you know, higher results.
Yes, sir.
And I'm just making sure that you understand the correlation there. That being hands-on in all those areas is probably not what we're looking to do.
Understandable. Well, see, that's the thing. In a small system, I think I wear 20 different hats that are not listed there because we have to,
Right.
because we don't have the resources. So somebody's got to do the job. So it's pretty much hands on deck. And I do understand that in a larger system, you have to trust people to do what you ask them to do, because you do have a lot of highly competent people in this system. It's my job to support them and to push them to be the best they possibly can be.
Mr. Cooper?
Well, let's drop down to number 6. Assistant superintendent, we've covered a lot of this ground already. What are your strengths and weaknesses as assistant superintendent currently? And how do you see those parlaying into the superintendent role?
I'd really like to talk more about my strengths as a leader, as not there, because it all kind of parlays over together. It all kind of winds together. I'm not just a father, not just a husband, not just a college professor. I'm all of those all wrapped into one. So in the professional portfolio that I gave each of you, you have a listing of my StrengthsFinder profile from the works of Buckingham and Clifton. And what they've done is they've analyzed highly effective individuals over multiple years, and they've come up with a Gallup poll. So basically my 5 signature strengths as a leader are #1, positivity. And in my portfolio, I'll go into better detail with this, but I'll talk about it really quickly. That means that how you see me now is how I am 5 years from now, is how I'm going to be 20 years from now. I always look at the glasses half full. It's not about what we can do, it's about what we can do. And when presented with problems, you know what, it's okay. Let's figure it out, let's see what we need to do, and let's move on. My second strength is communication. I love to talk to people, I love to listen to people, I love to interact with people. You stick me in a factory doing mundane work, the same thing over and over and over, and I can't stand it. I have to be working with people, and I have to communicate with people. Number 3 is maximizer. Maximizer is basically like polishing the pearl. What that means is I can take something from good to great and feel like I've achieved something. But if I take something from poor to only good, I feel like I've been a failure. And that's one of the things that I love about Hoover's system. You've got a good school system. What I want to do is I want to help take the school system to greatness. Number 4 is called woo. That's called winning others over. I like to meet you. Woo means there's no such thing as strangers. Those are the only people I haven't met yet. So I like to interact with you. I like to shake your hand. I like to meet you. I like to know about you. And then I'd like to see how I can plug you into our job. So when I'm out and about, when I'm meeting with city councilmen, when I'm meeting with business leaders, when I'm working at the chamber, I'm shaking hands and I'm smiling and my brain is clicking. Where can I use you in the system to provide greater learning opportunities for all kids? And then the last one is my ethical decision making. That's one of the things that I wouldn't be working at 2 Christian universities if I didn't have a high sense of ethics. I'm always thinking about what's right. And sometimes what's right isn't popular, but sometimes what's right is what we have to do. And so I'm really high in the ethical decision making. Do you want to talk about the other side, your weaknesses as a superintendent?
Let's talk about your strengths a little bit more. What you
Sure.
described 4 out of 5 are your strengths out of Strength Finder 1.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And when I went on to your personal website,
Yes, sir.
looked at that, it pulled up the Gallup thing, and there's several articles in there. There's an article in there about talent. That's
Yes.
what
Mm-hmm.
Now, talent is a natural, innate thing, not something you can learn, study,
You're born
experience,
with it.
develop.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all successful people have similar talents: motivator, assertiveness, accountability, relationships, decision making. You highlighted some of those, and they kind of overlap your strengths to some extent.
Yes, sir.
How are you on the talent side? How do you look at yourself on the talent side? I mean, it's on your website. That's the only thing I'm asking.
I look at myself as a continual work in process. I'm always constant learning and growing, learning and growing. I learn from experiences, I learn from other people, I learn from communicating with others. I'm still growing, and that's one of the things that I tell my students in my doctoral classes, is you'll be learning and growing until the day they put that nail in the box. And if you get to a point where you don't feel like you're learning and growing, guess what? Things are about to explode on you. So you better open your eyes and you better take a look around.
But the Gallup thing said, you're either born with it or you don't. You're not going to get it from growing and learning and all that.
Mhm.
Do you feel like you have innate talent?
Feel like I have a what talent?
Innate talent.
I believe I do.
That's not a catch-22 question.
Not a
I
problem.
mean, I want you to tell us that you feel absolutely strong about yourself in regards to talent, not only in terms of strengths and that kind of thing.
Oh, exactly. And I think what you're doing is you're getting really into efficacy, is what you're talking about. You're talking about, am I confident in my leadership abilities to work with people and do what I need to do? Without a doubt, yes. That's one of the things, I don't think I would be at this point if I didn't feel a high sense of self-efficacy. Now, luckily, what I have is a wife that's also a therapist, and so she likes to break that efficacy down from time to time. She calls it keeping my feet on the ground.
What kind of therapist?
She's a marriage and family therapist.
Oh, really?
Exactly. She works with children, she works with families. So I'm lucky. I'm lucky to have her. I think she was a therapist before she thought she wanted to be a therapist.
Well, I'd say if she was a physical therapist, you'd be lucky to have her.
Yeah, even better, exactly. But efficacy is something that I teach in my college classes. It's when you dig into some of the other work, some of the books that I teach, like Kuzes and Posner or Leader's Legacy, when you work through aspirations, when you work through courageousness, when you work through relationships, you have to have a high-level sense of efficacy. You don't get in this job to please people. You get into this type of job because you want to make a difference in the lives of kids. One of the things I like to say is I'm not in the job of wish fulfillment. My job is to motivate others to serve a purpose. Because if you get bogged down in wish fulfillment and making your decisions based on making people happy, all you're going to do is make people more upset. One of my mentors, Dr. Jim Duncan, who's the superintendent of Wilson County, told me one time, Chris, when I realized I couldn't please 100% of the people 100% of the time, I became a much better leader. And that was a wise man, because he's exactly right.
And he can sleep at night.
And he can sleep at night. Exactly.
Okay, let's flip the page again and talk a little bit about what we all have in terms of weaknesses.
Gotcha. Oh, well, I mean, first one that I put in my areas down there is listener. Sometimes I forget the Stephen Covey rule, listen with an intent to understand, not an intent to reply. So I have to keep telling myself, listen, listen, don't reply, listen. Secondly, saying thank you to people. Sometimes I get so caught up in what we're doing and moving from task to task to task that sometimes I forget to tell people, you know what? Thank you for doing a good job on working with the principals in that certain area. Thank you for getting that resource for teachers. That was really cool and they really appreciated it. sometimes I forget that. So sometimes I've got to stop what I'm doing and pay attention and then be aware. And then the last one, sometimes I have a hard time with practicing the intricate art of no. Balance is really difficult for me, and that's one of the things where I love my wife. She says, you know, do you really need to be taking that on? Are you sure this is something you need to do? So working on the word no is pretty difficult for me, because when I see something that I think can be great for kids, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. And then sometimes things get out of balance. You got to put it back in balance.
Well, those are three good things that are important in the fact that you know that it was accomplished.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Kelly?
Dr. Barzak,
Yes, sir.
what would you say are our top three challenges to the Hoover School District as you see them?
Well, one of the things I noticed the other candidates are all from Alabama. I'm not. I'm from Tennessee. So most of my information, unfortunately or fortunately, has come from the media. So when I started to look at what are some things that I think that we need to work on, the first thing that I figured out and kind of looked at was restoring community and parental confidence, if you would, trust. I think what you need from me is a leader that inspires trust, that inspires confidence in people, no hidden agendas. What we talk about in our classes is do what you say you'll do, which means honoring and keeping promises. So that's one of the things that if I get the honor of taking the job, is that's one of the things I realize I've got to do from day one. People have to trust me. And the only way they're going to trust me is if I start with that first. I have to be able, trust is earned, and if you don't trust me, it's okay. I'm going to keep working on it, and I'm going to keep getting there, and I'm going to keep honoring my promises. So that's one of the things that I realize I've got to do. I've got to be transparent, I've got to be honest, I've got to be open, and people have to trust me. The second thing I went to is continuing the academic success of Hoover schools with a changing demographic. Much like Oak Ridge, your demographics are different from where they were 5 years ago. We can impact high levels of learning for all kids, but what we have to do is we have to be intentional about it. We have to know what we're going to do, and then we've got to set out to doing it. And this is a psychological process around goal setting, which I'm going to talk about in a different question. But basically it refers back to the research by Locke and Latham that talks about when you get intentional with children or intentional with adults, and they know what to expect, and then you help them get there, you set them onto a path of success that they never would have realized before. And so that's one of the things that I want to talk about a little bit later tonight is about goal setting. And then the third one is alignment. Aligning everything we do in Hoover to common practices and common goals. One of the programs I'm going to talk tonight that I bring with me is based on Malcolm Baldridge's success model. And it's all about systematic and systemic work. How do we work together, both externally and internally, to take Hoover where we want it to be? It's kind of like one of my friends says a goal, or a plan without a goal is just a wish. You know what, we'd like to get to 27 on ACT, but by thinking we can do it this way, without ever discussing and talking and ever setting anything in place, we're not going to get there. So how do we set systemic and systematic practices in place in order to get to that 27 on the ACT? So those are the three things I think we need to work on.
So out of these
Yes, sir.
three, I guess you're saying that our ACTs are probably low, we need to get to 27. I appreciate the goal there, but as far as the challenges you see, we're deficient.
Your ACT is actually really good.
Yes,
It's good. However, what we found in research is that when a child can get a 27 on the ACT, it opens up different doors for them. They get to go to different places. And let's say, for example, a child gets a 27 on the ACT but decides they don't want to go to college. Let's say they want to do something with their hands. They're probably not going to be doing that very long. They're probably going to be moving into management in that specific field that they go into. So what I'm talking about is offering greater opportunities for kids. You've got a good starting point. I'm not going to give you bones about that. It's a good starting point. But I think we can get even better.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Murphy?
Please start. Okay. You talked about Hoover City School teachers and how great they were.
Yes,
they
sir.
are, rather.
Yes, sir.
But greatness comes from having passion.
Yes, sir.
And we have a lot of passionate educators and a lot of passionate principals.
Yes, sir.
They know their school, they know the kids. Matter of fact, they know generations of kids in a sense.
Beautiful.
They have passed through that system. With saying that, please name and describe a major decision that your staff or principal disagreed upon, and yet y'all found a resolve to that.
So one of the things that I refer to in question number 2 are what we call the keys to college and career readiness. That's the Malcolm Baldrige model. So one of the things that we eventually get down to in that process is the schools setting their own scorecard measures and their own goals about how they're going to achieve the college and career readiness, how they're going to achieve the keys to college and career readiness. So what happens in that process is the schools come up with their own scorecard measures and their own goals to denote their own success. This is how we show we're doing well. So a recent problem that we had in Oak Ridge is that some of the scorecard measures that came in were kind of watered down and kind of easy, so that when schools scored high, they looked better than other schools. One of the things that we explain with the keys is it's not punitive in nature. They're not meant to make one school look better than the other. They're really meant to determine where are we going together as a district and how are we going to get there systematically and systemically. So we kind of pushed back on some of those measures and said, no, I think you can do better than this. You know your kids, you know your teachers, you know what you need to do. I think you can be a little bit more rigorous. And so we had some push back and forth until we finally got to a point where we asked the question. So these measures that you've put down, are these high levels of learning for all kids? And the answer was no. And so it really made them do a gut check and bring it back to the table and go, okay, Dr. Marzak and Dr. Borchers, they want us to be rigorous. They really want to push the envelope. So let's push the envelope. So they brought back measures that were a lot more rigorous, and we loved it. So at first they didn't agree. And then when we posed the question and made them not look at themselves as adults, but they looked at what they were offering for kids, they took it seriously. And consequently, they have very rigorous measures on their school-based scorecards.
Follow up.
Yes, sir.
You have a scenario, you have, not scenario actually, you have leaders that have years of experience.
Yes, sir.
Years of experience in education from elementary to middle to high school.
Yes, sir.
How do you navigate that, especially not being from Alabama,
Good point.
being an outsider?
Yes, sir.
You been in a situation like that before, or have you navigated out of that? Or how would you?
I think it basically comes down to relationships. I can't walk in the door in the first 2 weeks and say, hey, I need scorecard measures. I've got to build relationships with the people that are in those buildings. And the way I do it is one of the questions you referred to in here, getting out of my office. I can't build relationships sitting behind a desk. I've got to get out of my office. I have to be in schools. I have to be in principals' meetings. I have to talk to them. I've got to get to know them. They've got to get to know me. One of the things that I do that I think is really powerful and it's really tough for a lot of people is when we're behind closed doors, I want you to refer to me by first name, because we're working together to get our kids what they need to be successful in life. Now, if you want to call me Dr. Marzak, that's fine. I'm okay with that. And when we're outside in front of parents or in front of students, you know, it's Ms. Smith, it's Dr. Marzak. I'll refer to you properly. But behind closed doors, we're working together. We're colleagues. And so one of the things that I like to do in principals meetings or in school-based meetings, what we call administrative council, we're on a first-name basis. Let's just talk about it. Let's just be real. Let's talk about some of the situations that are going on. And what happens is that builds a level of trust and confidence. Some people are not comfortable with it. That's okay. You don't have to call me Chris. It's all right. I respect that. But that's one of the ways that I work with building relationships with people. Another way is I look for what they do that's great, and I celebrate them for it. You know what? This is going really good at your school. Congratulations. This is really neat. I sat at dismissal, and I watched kids come out. They're smiling. They're happy. Man, you must be leading a really great school. That's a good job. Congratulations. And then continuing to build and build and build. And what happens is when those relationships are so high, when you do need to ask a tough question, you've got that bank account up here, and it's not automatically dropping to zero. It's not a huge withdrawal. And we can have those conversations back and forth. And consequently, I want to know the exact same thing. If I'm doing something that's sacrificing trust, or if I'm doing something that's calling your leadership into question, you know what? Tell me. Because if I don't know, I can't change. And that's the kind of relationship that I want to have with the professional staff, here in Hoover. Because if they don't look to me as a leader, if they don't respect me, then we've got a problem. And that problem begins with me. I'm the one that has to garner that respect and trust. One of the things I referred to later in my notes is I have a simple little litmus test. If I'm in Publix and you see me and you dart down the aisle because you don't want to see me, that's a problem. And that's a problem that I've got to fix. Because if you don't want to come up to me in public and say, hey, Dr. Marzak, how you doing? Or hey, Chris, what's going on? That's a problem that I've created. And I've got to fix that problem. Because anybody should be able to come up to me and say hello. I'm a teacher, just like everybody else in this district. I'm just the lead teacher. So they should be able to talk to me just like any of their other colleagues. That takes time.
You just mentioned Baldridge, Keys.
Yes, sir?
Is Tennessee one of the states that use Common Core as the basic teaching learning standard?
We call it the Tennessee Core.
But it's in essence based on Common Core standard?
Yes, sir.
Okay, on assessments, what do you guys in Oak Ridge and or Tennessee do in terms of formative assessments?
Well, no, what we do in Oak Ridge is we believe in the tenets of the professional learning community model. So we work on collaboratively created formative assessments. One of the things that we've done is the state of Tennessee has a differentiated pay model. And so you could choose to do one of two things. You could either pay people for performance, which we know longitudinally doesn't work, or you can pay people for taking on extra tasks and responsibilities. So what we have in Oak Ridge is we have school-based instructional coaches around STEM, professional learning communities, and using data to inform instruction. So every single school has at least one of these coaches. You're paid a stipend for taking on the responsibilities, and then you also receive a sub twice a month so that you can do the work during the day. Can't be an instructional coach at 4:30 in the afternoon, 75% of the school is gone. You know, you've got you got family responsibilities, some people work extra jobs. So with those professional learning community coaches, with me kind of helping lead that charge, we took all of our coaches to Professional Learning Communities Conference. We learned the tenets of professional learning communities, and then we implemented them starting this past year. So one of the jobs of the coaches is to help their department and grade level teams develop common formative assessments based on assessed standards, and then daily intervention and acceleration for students that are successful and not successful. Luckily, that ties into the whole RTI model with intervening with students during the course of the day. So that's what we've done. Basically what we've done is we've taken away the district level benchmarking, and we've created the autonomy in the schools to intervene with kids on what they're going to assess, what they're going to be assessed on, and getting them the skills they need before they take those standardized assessments.
So these assessments, are they actually district assessments, or
No.
are they statewide, or are they national?
No. Well, are you talking about our formative assessments?
Yes.
Our formative assessments are school-based.
Okay.
So let's take, for example, Robertsville Middle School, 7th grade. So the 7th grade teachers that teach science get together and say, what's a high leverage standard that these kids are going to be assessed on that we don't think that they're very good on? They develop that common formative assessment with help from the professional learning community coaches and some other district personnel. They administer that assessment to kids, they collaboratively grade it, and then they split kids into groups to get them the skills they need before they take that test. So they're school-based. We keep all that data in-house.
What we do currently is a little bit different than Alabama's 2020 plan, which is, you know, it's renaming a lot of the core tenets of Common Core that we don't on the 30-some odd focus.
Yes, sir. You guys use the ACT suite of assessments.
Exactly.
We wanted to do that in Oak Ridge. They wouldn't let us.
And in addition, we use Explore and a couple of other assessments as well, and looking for ways to push it back down below 3rd grade.
Beautiful, beautiful.
So anyway.
Well, why 3rd grade? Why did you say 3rd grade?
Well, ACT Aspire starts 3rd grade, and Explore drops down K through 2.
Gotcha.
So we're covering all the bases, but it's one thing to assess, but it's also, if you're teaching the standard, it's also something to assess that aligns with the standard. So that's the challenge for everybody.
Yeah.
PLCs, we've got them, been doing them. That's not.
Excellent. So what will be different then?
Well, the only thing I'm saying is different a little bit about this is that, you know, the ACT suite of assessments, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
you know, is a common, consistent, nationally based, you know, summative assessments.
Yes, sir.
We do formative assessments in between. And we don't make them up here. I guess we're trying to teach the standard and trying to find resources that are database that lead us to assessments that do correlate to the standard.
Can you see the smile on my face? I'm having a formative assessment discussion with a board member. I love that. Thank you. And the reason why I said third grade, I thought you may have been pointing to the research that says if you want to get a kid a 27 on the ACT, it begins in third grade.
Well, it does an ACT suite of assessments because it's all correlated to the end
Yeah.
result, which is the ACT.
Beautiful.
If you want to talk about web depth of knowledge, we'll talk about that later.
Excellent. Depth of knowledge, I love it. Ah, it's great.
Yeah, it's hard. And your wife is probably helping you sort through some of that thinking process. Anyway, thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Marzek,
Yes, ma'am.
how do you envision your role relationship with our city leaders?
Critical. We've got to work together. I have to work with them, they have to work with me. So getting to know them, building relationships with them, getting them to understand how critical the education of every child is in the city of Hoover is big. If they don't trust me, then we're going to have problems. If they don't trust you guys, then we're going to have problems. And so going back to the original question about building transparency with the community, it's going to be the same way with the city leaders. I've got to build transparency with them. They've got to know who I am. They've got to know why I make the decisions that I make. And I really have no agenda except for one agenda. I'm going to do whatever it takes so that all kids can get a good job. That's it. Because I think really that's why we're here. We're here to make sure that kids have good jobs. I want to know how we can get more of our kids into their fields and their jobs and emerging businesses that are coming into Hoover or are here in Hoover. One of the key things that I look for kids with jobs is three things. One, does it have good pay? Two, does it have good benefits? And three, does it have advancement? And those are three of the things that we look for in careers for kids, especially what's coming down the pike with STEM-related fields. I want to know, is Hoover interested in being the premier STEM district in the nation? Because that's one of the things that we've started to work on in Oak Ridge, and from what I've researched at Hoover, we can give them a run for the money. And consequently, the superintendent would love the challenge. So that's one of the things that I'm curious to find out. Are you interested in being that premier STEM district in the nation? Because you've got the components. You've got a one-to-one program rolling, iPads K through 2, Chromebooks 3 through 5. How long have you been doing that?
We built it up over the last 3 to 5 years.
Beautiful. Perfect. So you've already got some of the analytical thought kind of going into place. So I think that you guys are primed and ready to really kick that off if you want to be the premier STEM district in the nation and kind of show off what you're doing to other people in the country. Because if city leaders, and going back to the original question, if city leaders and I don't work together, then we sacrifice opportunities for our students that graduate from Hoover and from Spain Park. And that doesn't need to happen.
In Tennessee, as an assistant superintendent, do you work with the city leaders there, or is that more or less the superintendent?
It's both of us. We both belong to the Chamber of Commerce. Now, Dr. Borchers works directly with Mark Watson, who's the city manager. But just to give an indication of something that I did working with city leaders. So a big industry partner in Oak Ridge is Y12. It's kind of like a nuclear warehousing, storehouse, weapons manufacturer. One of the things in talking with one of the leaders of Y12 is they have an aging workforce. Half of their chemical operators right now could drop their keys off the desk and leave, and they retire with full benefits. And then they'd be stuck with half of a workforce. So in talking with one of the city leaders, I said, well, why don't we get a chemical operations industry certification rolling in Oak Ridge so that when our kids walk across the stage, they can walk over to Y12 and get a job making $35 an hour to start with full benefits and a free college education with a bachelor's in chemical operations if they want to do it. And her response is, well, I don't know, why don't we do it? So starting next year, we have a chemical operator coming from Y12 that's going to come to Oak Ridge High School. We're going to provide the materials and the space. They're going to provide the people, and then we're going to train students in chemical operations. And at the end of next year, they're going to walk out the door with an industry certification. That's just one example. And all it took was a simple conversation to go, why don't we work together? Okay, let's do that. You have a need, We have the workforce. Let's do it. And that's where we are.
Mr. Presley?
Marzette, could you,
Yes, sir.
would you please give us some examples of where you were personally involved in leading the process to develop and successfully implement a school budget?
Beautiful. So kind of going back to what I said before, I operate a $48 million budget. I'm proud to say that last year, spent 98% of that budget. Came 2% under, and I sent some money back to the general fund. Our CFO liked that. So specific examples that I pulled out, which are referenced in the notes. First off, the instructional technology. Up until this year, information technology was running the instructional technology line item. So we had people with an IT mindset making decisions based on educating the needs of kids. So I went to the superintendent and said, I want to take that on. I think we need to have an instructional mindset working with instructional technology. So currently, I operate that budget. So I work with the principals to determine what type of software do we need to be purchasing district-wide that will impact learning for all students. So that's one of the budgets that I maintain. Also talking about the instructional coaches, going back to the Tennessee differentiated pay model. I handle all of that budget. So I make sure that we have enough money to pay all of our coaches. I make sure that we have enough money to pay for all of our soft skills, professional development for the coaches, because working with kids is completely different from working with adults. I also maintain their substitute budget line as well as their professional development line. And the third one that I threw in here is just the personal curriculum instruction budget. Overseeing our Discovery Ed STEM partnership. So I have to make sure that we budget enough every single year for our Discovery Education tech books. I make sure that we budget enough for our project-based learning initiative with the Buck Institute. I make sure that we budget enough every year to deal with all of our curriculum alignment with Discovery Education, because we're really partners working in that together. I work on making sure that we have enough money for substitute teachers, that we spent correctly our Race to the Top budget, our $50 million grant that we got from Washington and the state of Tennessee. I also manage the school-based personnel, all travel for the district, principals, teachers, central office personnel, and myself, as well as textbooks and all of the career and technical education budgets. So all of that's maintained, and I've yet to go over budget.
Does it give you a little bit of concern going from a $48 million budget to one that's about 5 times that?
No, sir. Different size, different numbers. Still your main job, come under budget.
Again, though, I think here you're not going to find that you have to be that hands-on with the budget.
Yes, sir. Well, for example, like the career and technical education, we have a CTE director, and she and I work collaboratively on the career and technical education budget. In the end, I'm ultimately responsible for it. However, she's a great professional, and I put a lot of trust and responsibility into her, and we have conversations about how it's going.
You probably know this, but fortunately, here,
Yes, sir.
our IT director was once a classroom teacher.
Yes, sir. Talked to him on Twitter the other day.
Covers a little bit of instructional technology as well.
Beautiful, perfect.
Mr. Cooper?
Here comes the softball. You ready?
Throw it, lob it.
So it's great and wonderful to talk about all this technology,
Yeah.
professional development. It's just an uplifting kind of thing.
Yes, sir.
But if people don't accept, embrace, and utilize technology with the classroom door shut,
Yes, sir.
it's just an interesting conversation. With that backdrop, what experience have you had in incorporating technology in the classroom to ensure teacher acceptance of the technology as both a teaching and learning multiplier?
So I've personally used technology as a teacher, as an assistant principal, a network principal, a college professor, and as an assistant superintendent. Consequently, my doctoral dissertation was the effect of technology education for teachers. My college work that I do is an extension of my dissertation, because here's basically what I found out. One of the things we talk about in English language learning theory is a thing called the affective filter. The affective filter means I don't have enough knowledge and information about it, so I'm scared to answer. It's kind of like when we look at a room full of brand new ESL students and we smile and shake our head and ask them a question. Do you guys know what the letter A is? And every single head nods and they smile. But they have no idea what the letter A is because their filter's here. It's the same way with some adults. They are so nervous and scared about instructional technology or information technology that when you say, hey, can you send me an email with an attached PowerPoint denoting all those facts? Sure, I can do that. And we walk away and they're like, I have no idea what that person just said. So what I do is I work with adults to help them lower that affective filter so that they're confident in their abilities to use instructional technology. So that's what I do at the master's and doctoral level at 2 different universities. I specifically ask to work with the students, people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, who are nervous about technology, because I like to break down and alleviate those fears. People are scared because they're afraid they're going to make a mistake, they're afraid they're going to break it, or they're afraid that somebody's going to think they're stupid and make fun of them. So what I try to do is tell them that you're going to make a mistake, it's okay. I'll help you whenever you make that mistake. Secondly, you're not going to break it. Unless you take a hammer and smash it, it's not going to break it. And thirdly, the only stupid question is the one you don't ask. So ask. And I'm not going to make you feel dumb. I'm going to empower you so you can turn around and help somebody else. So as a classroom teacher, I use technology, of course, to influence fluency and numeracy in the classroom. We used it to go visit various sites. I used to take kids on virtual field trips. And this is in the early 90s. As an assistant principal, what I did is I trained teachers how to do the exact same things that I did. What I did as a principal is I overhauled schools concerning instructional technology. So one of the schools that I reference in my professional portfolio and also is in one of the articles that I published is talking about how I took a school that had no technology, and by the time I left it, every single classroom had smart boards, and I saved money because I trained the teachers on how to use the smart boards myself. Every classroom had a digital projector, document cameras. We had 2 stationary computer labs, an iPod mobile lab, a Samsung Galaxy Tab mobile lab, and student response systems. Because what we were able to do with all of those things is engage students in their own learning. Through the student response systems, we were able to do right there formative assessments so you could find out how students were doing and adjust your instruction to help all kids learn. And we empowered people to basically do something different than paper and pencil and textbooks. Now as an assistant superintendent, what I do, because I'm really far away from the classroom, is I train principals on how to help their teachers influence the use of instructional technology in the classroom. We currently have a BYOD program going on in Oak Ridge and eventually a one-to-one program hopefully next year. I maintain a weekly email blast called BYOD Tips and Tricks. So every Monday morning, I send an email out to all staff telling them something that they can use in the classroom that's completely free that they can use to spark learning in their students. And at the end, I've got, if you'd like to add something to this newsletter, click this link. It takes you to a Google survey. You get to put in some information, and then if I pick yours, you get a prize that week. We send you like an Expo marker set and throw a little blast in the newsletter. Thank you very much to so-and-so for throwing in this tip. We greatly appreciate it. How'd you like to be picked? So what I'm doing is I'm trying to influence others to make a difference in the lives of kids. So as I keep going away, that influence is about exponential. Because if I teach a principal how to do it and give them the efficacy, they can teach 50 people how to do it. And I've expanded my influence.
Well, I'll be honest with you, and we alluded to this earlier in the previous question.
Yes, sir.
It's kind of redundant,
It's
but
okay.
anyway, it's again not so much hands-on as a superintendent role here as much as it is creating the expectation, empowering, and through that, ensuring that it is accepted and used in the classroom.
Yes, sir.
We've got, what you just described, we've got highly competent people and highly competent students who can and do most of that already.
Beautiful. Then I'm going to get along well with them if I get the job.
Yeah, so I mean, so
We're
it's
birds
not,
of a feather.
it's not a hands-on thing.
I got
It's
you.
a leadership, vision, and direction thing.
But if I do need to be hands-on, I've got the skills that I need to make that happen.
Well, you come to the job knowing what people are talking about.
Yes, sir.
That's an asset.
Thank you.
Let me interject one point.
Yes, sir.
As far as technology, it varies, of course, from elementary to high school.
Of course it does.
And I see you got years of experience in elementary school.
Yes, sir.
What's the cons in implementing that with teachers? Because the high school student, they develop things as they go to make it more efficient to learn their class, work, study, take tests, the entire 9.
Yeah.
And probably even help teacher as well on the way.
Exactly.
But with the elementary school principal, where that class is with that teacher, other than library and rec time,
Yeah.
they're teaching everything in the
Yeah.
sense. How do you implement that in the lesson plan to ensure that they stay on track with what they're supposed to teach, but at the same time, don't get behind learning about technology?
Understandable.
I'm gonna make it sense.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. Well, I think what you're talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, is how do you adjust those levels of technology integration as you move up the tiers to make sure that you're not losing control of making sure the kids learn some of the content in that whole course and pattern. Am I correct in that assumption? So basically, by empowering high school teachers that become aware of the technology that they're able to implement is kind of what I call the cool factor. When you're able to do something in the classroom and high school kids are like, whoa, I didn't know you could do that, that's pretty cool. That teacher gets really energized about what they're doing in the classroom because they're now looked at by kids as, man, you're a pretty innovative and cool teacher. I didn't know you could do that. Secondly, I think what we've got to do, and especially some of our secondary classrooms, is we have to become less masters of the content and more masters of the context. What that means is we have all of the basic facts are accessible online anywhere. I mean, I can take my phone out and pull out Siri and say, can you tell me who Albert Bandura is? And Siri could tell me, or reference me to websites. But if I ask it a why question or a how question, Siri's going to say, I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. And I think that's where we've got to go with our kids. We have to help them understand the why, and we have to help them understand the how. And the more our teachers can leverage the why and the how in the classroom, kids become more contextual in nature than they become more content in nature. And so it's that whole blended learning flip switch model that I think our teachers have to start to work to implement to help kids really be successful in a 21st century environment. Because the masters, you take away the internet, you go back 25 years, 30 years, the person that knew the most content, bless you, the person that knew the most content was the most important person in the room. But now that we have the world's information universally accessible to all, it's no longer master of the content, it's master of the context. So how do we help our teachers help kids become more contextual in nature?
Mr. Kelly?
Dr. Marzak, at the
Yes,
time
sir.
this question was asked, our legislature was considering the charter schools bill. Since then, the governor signed it, and even today, it's not part of this question at the start, today we're considering passage of a virtual charter school.
Yes, sir.
Could in fact have passed the House and been sent to the governor today. What's your thoughts on the code that just passed on charter schools and possibly the virtual school that would be controlled by the districts?
Well, change is the only constant in the universe. And as it stood the test of time, with your paradigms, your way of thinking, you either change or you die. You either change or you pass into obscurity. So going back to the question, it's going to have an impact. And what we have to do is we have to figure out how we can navigate that impact to really help our students get what they need in order to be successful. So one of the things that I reference and I look into here is if and when charter schools do move into Hoover City, or when students do want to enroll, or they want to enroll virtually, what that causes us to do is we've got to be on our A game. Because in essence, we're no longer the only free game in town. So how do we maximize our ability to get every single student into the doors that we possibly can of our school system? That means that our principals, our teachers, myself, our central office personnel, we become the masters of customer service. Because people will come to us if they think their kids and know their kids are getting a great education and they feel really good about it. This is the problem that we kind of experience in Nashville and what Tennessee is kind of going through, is as charters are moving in, people are really starting to have trouble holding on to the resources. Metro Nashville Public Schools is expected to hit a budget wall as so many charters open up and so much money starts going to charters. They're looking at how can we run the district now, because that money by law has to go to them. And this is going to kind of be the same thing that's going to happen in Alabama. So what we have to do is we have to ensure that Hoover City Schools are the best schools in town for your kids. And bring them here, we'll take care of them, we'll get them the education that they need, we'll get them great jobs, and you will not be disappointed that you chose Hoover City Schools. Change is coming. It's inevitable. It's happened, it stood the test of time. But how we navigate that change is going to be important.
It's very important to our district to expand on the arts. We realize the importance of not just actually the class, but
Yeah.
it enables you to learn other classes.
Mm-hmm.
In our district now, the charter school situation may not impact us because I think we have an excellent district.
Yeah.
But if you come up with a situation where an enhanced charter could become available for the arts or something else,
Yeah,
we want to do exactly what you said and make sure we offer the very best.
yeah.
So that's not an option.
Well, and what we kind of have to do, what I kind of laid out in my notes, is John Cotter, a while ago, instituted what he called the 8 steps of change. And number one, what we have to do is create a sense of urgency. Because what happens when students start to leave Hoover schools? When that money follows those students and they leave, we then have budget problems. And we don't need those budget problems. So well before that happens, we come back to this step and we create a sense of urgency by saying, we don't want this to take place 2 years down the road. So what can we do now? Let's huddle up the wagons. What can we do now to make sure that 2 years down the road that doesn't happen? It causes us to kind of think creatively, if you will. Things before that we said, no, we can't do that, now become, well, why can't we do that? Why can't we have an emphasis on the arts? Why can't we have an emphasis on STEM? Why can't we have intentional business partners that are in our schools and offering internships to our students? Why can't we becomes much more powerful than, no, we can't do that. Because typically when you go to that word, no, we can't do that, that's when you start to see opportunities slip for students and parents in the Hoover City school system. So first we got to create that sense of urgency. That's number one. And then I kind of laid out over the next 8 what else we need to do. We need to build that guiding coalition. That means that we've got to work together to understand who we are and what we offer to families and kids. Number 3, we got to form a strategic vision. Where are we going and how we know we got there? That's one of the things that I'm going to refer to in my Keys to College and Career Readiness, because that's built with community input. Number 4, we got to build a volunteer army. Every single staff member and every single community member and every single parent and kid that loves Hoover City Schools, we've got to put that out there, because word of mouth is your best selling point. Next, we've got to enable action by removing barriers. What can I, the superintendent of schools, remove so that yes is possible? Because once ego is taken out of the mix, then what can we do that's going to be beneficial for students and for parents and for teachers? We've got to generate short-term wins. And then what we have to do is we have to celebrate those wins. We've got to publish those wins. They've got to go in the paper. They've got to go on the website. They've got to go on news. So when people hear Hoover, 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 the first thing they start to think in their mind is, man, I need to put my kids in Hoover schools. All I hear is Hoover, Hoover, Hoover. That's awesome. It's kind of that whole communications, public branding, public relations piece. Then we've got to sustain the acceleration. We can't get complacent. We get to that 27, we can't stop and say, all right, work's done, let's go home. No, then we got to go for 29. Then we got to go for 31. We got to keep putting that target out there a little bit further and keep saying, why not? We can do that. And last thing is we have to institute the change. We got to keep working, we got to keep flexing, we got to keep changing. You can't rest on your laurels, because when you stop, somebody else shoots right by you. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Murphy?
Now, you covered a lot of this in your past questions.
Yes,
And I
sir.
want you to expand on it a lot more
Okay.
as far as internal assessments. So I'll start at, let's see, question 12 states that outside of the state and federal mandated testing requirements, what internal indicators have you implemented to determine student success?
You know what? I think it's just time if I talked about the keys to college and career readiness, because we keep going back to it. I referred to it in question number 2, but I think it's time. Okay, so this goes directly to question number 12. So what are the keys to college and career readiness? Kind of what I alluded to before. It's based on the Malcolm Baldrige model. So one of the things that I'd like to do, and what I really like to do, one of the things I bring with me is the KEYS process and the KEYS modeling. So the first couple months on the job, we meet with as many internal and external stakeholders as we can. And we ask them one simple question. What do you want for our students, your children, to know and be able to do by the time they leave Hoover City Schools? And we ask them this question in 3 different phases: elementary school, middle school, and high school. And over a 3 to 4 month process, we ask as many people as we can. We get as many data points as we can. And then what we do when we're done, when we've got all of the data that we can possibly get, we then sit down as a core group in Hoover City and we say, okay, how many keys are we going to create? We can't create 9. 9 is way too many. The good number is somewhere between 6 and 8. Generally, you're going to have 2 keys at the elementary school, 2 keys at the middle school, and then anywhere from 3 to 4 at the high school. And these are our indicators of success. These are the things that tell us, to the community and tell everybody, how are we doing as a school system? So once these keys are developed, we broadcast it out. It goes on the website, it goes to the parent groups, it goes to business leaders. I talk about it at the chamber, I talk about it at the city, I talk about it here at the boardroom, and we have what are called the Hoover City Schools Keys to College and Career Readiness. Once the keys are developed, that's when we align each of the keys onto a 5-step model, all the way from intervene to access. Number 1 is the worst, number 5 is the top. And then we currently benchmark ourselves, where are we on these keys? For example, one of the things when I was referring to 3rd grade, maybe one of our keys is students reading on 3rd grade, students reading on grade level by the time they leave 3rd grade. Why is that critical? Because the research says that if a child's not reading on grade level by 4th grade, there's an 82% chance they're going to be incarcerated at some point in their life. Because if you can't read by middle school, you get left behind. So doing it at 3rd grade means that we've got to jump on that for 4th grade. We can intervene with kids. Consequently, kids performing on math on grade level by 4th grade. Why is that important? Because if you can't do math on grade level by 3rd grade, there's no way you're going to get a 27 composite on the ACT. But those could be keys that the community could pick, or it could be something completely different. So those are some examples with the 5 level indicators. What happens next is each of the individual schools have to develop their own scorecards according to the tier that they're currently assigned to. So all of the elementary schools have to focus on key number 1 and 2. All of the middle schools have to focus on key 3 and 4, and all of the high schools focus on keys 5, 6, 7, and 8, or however many keys they are. This way we have systematic alignment. Everybody's moving in the same path, focusing on the exact same thing. The scorecard, the Keys of College and Career Readiness, that's an external document, if you want it to be. The school-based scorecards are internal documents. They're not punitive in nature. So let's say, for example, we look at an elementary school. They only have 65% of their kids reading on grade level by 3rd grade. I don't go to that school, close the door in that principal's office and say, you better get that up to 50 by next year, or you and I are going to be having another conversation. That doesn't happen. I go and meet with that principal and go, okay, you're at 6, you're here. What do you need to get to here? How can I help you raise that proficiency a little bit better? Well, Dr. Marzak, it sure would be great if we had a reading specialist so that I could help my teachers learn how to read so that my kids could do better on their 3rd grade scorecard. Okay, well, let's put a reading specialist in place if you think that's going to have a direct impact on your school-based scorecard. So each of the schools have their scorecards. It goes back to that question you asked me about what kind of disagreement do you have. So if they send me some measures for their scorecard that I don't think are rigorous enough, I'm going to push back on it with the question, do you think that this is a rigorous measure to impact learning for all students? And we'll go back and forth until we come to a really strict measure that's rigorous. They also have a 5-level indicator that goes all the way from intervene to succeed. Now, what has to happen after the school-based scorecard is the individual teachers and students have to work together to set SMART goals to influence their work, which directly influences their school-based scorecard, which directly influences the district-based scorecard. The reason why we do SMART goals is because that's one of the tenets of professional learning communities. And going back to the data by Locke and Latham that goes all the way back to the 50s and 60s, what they found is that when students set goals and they take intentionality in their own learning, they achieve things that they never thought before possible. Their efficacy in themselves increases because they realize that they discipline themselves to do something that they couldn't before do. Not only that, everything becomes intentional. So if I know that I need to read this book with 80% accuracy by the end of the week, all that week I'm practicing on reading that book with 85% accuracy. And I'm coming in ready to my teacher, ready to talk to them. Or if I know that key number 7 for Hoover City becomes all students will graduate with either an industry certification, dual enrollment AP, or participating in military prep, we know what kind of opportunities we need to put in place so the kids can be successful. If Hoover City picks industry certification as one of the things they want for our kids, then I've got to get out there and beat that pavement and bring some industry certification into our school system. So that when kids set goals to say, I'm going to get an industry certification before I turn 18, we work to help them get to that point. So it directly impacts the school and it directly impacts the district. So the keys to college career readiness are systemic and systematic alignment to greatness. If one of our keys becomes an ACT composite of 27, all right, guys, what do we do? How do we get to that point? Do we start having students take their first ACT their sophomore year? Because consequently, we know the research says you always do better your second time around. So let's take it our sophomore year, take round 2 your junior year, because that's the one that goes on your composites. Would our ACT composite rise? Especially if our sophomores had feedback concerning what they did well and did not do well on the ACT. But we start to have those conversations about what is possible, what can we do? And because we're all working in the same path, we don't have what we call random acts of greatness. I imagine that there are some phenomenal things going on in this district. If I walked around at any of these educator schools and popped into classrooms or looked at data walls, I know there's some phenomenal stuff going on. And what we call is random acts of greatness. There's arrows all over the place. What I've got to do is I've got to get all of those arrows in alignment. I've got to bring them all moving in the same direction. Because if we say we're going to Florida, that could be North Florida, that could be South Florida, that could be Pensacola, that could be Key West. People are driving all over the place. But if I say we are going to 121B Baker Street in Jacksonville, Florida, and we're taking I-40, everybody's going to get on the same path, in the same route, and go to the same place. And we're going to get there. That's my job.
And you gave them a lot of great examples. I'm sure it's due to experience as well.
Yes, sir.
Can you give me, let me retract that.
It's okay.
Can you give me an actual example where, over the last 5 years, we've been in Tennessee, where you have improved, saw a need to improve a particular set of parameters and went forward and moved forward and accomplished that goal?
Can you get a little bit more detailed?
Let's talk about elementary school.
Sure. Yeah.
Let's talk about, have you ever had a situation where, or an event where math or English wasn't at a certain point?
Oh, yes, sir.
And you walked into that school and came up with an idea and it went well.
Yeah, I can tell you how I work collaboratively with the teachers to make McGavick Elementary a reward school in the state of Tennessee, the top 5%.
Right.
So basically what we did is we sat down and we analyzed how are we working? What are we doing for kids? And what we realized is we were really focusing on ourselves as adults, and we were not focusing so much on what students needed to know and be able to do. So we would say, you know what, I'm going to do this great lesson. I'm going to do a lesson on homonyms. And so I'm going to make some really cool activities. I'm going to make a PowerPoint. I'm going to make some games. And so the teachers were working really hard. They were working before school, after school, on weekends. And they were really putting their heart and soul into making sure that that homonyms lesson was the best lesson that they ever taught in their entire life. So they did that. And they get to Friday, and they do a test on homonyms. 40% of the kids couldn't pass the test. They're on the weekend going, I made worksheets. I made a PowerPoint. How can these kids not know what homonyms are? And they were coming in on Monday and looking at the kids and going, what's a homonym again? And there's kids going, and so that was going on a lot in the school that I was working in. And so we really worked together to say, okay, let's not focus so much on what we have to teach. let's start focusing more on what students have to learn. So let's focus on the kids that know homonyms, and let's not do homonyms anymore for those kids. Let's focus on the kids that don't know homonyms, and let's work on those kids. But it's not you work on them, and Mr. Presley, you work on them, and Ms. Frazier, you work on them. Let's work on them together as an entire grade level. Let's find all of our kids that don't know homonyms, and let's work with them. And for the kids that do know it, let's push them to higher levels. So that's where we started to build in some of our school-based formative assessments with daily intervention and instruction. Now, the next thing we did is kind of go into the SMART goal setting, which is kind of what I talked about before. So McGavick Elementary School was a 30-30-30. 30% white, 30% black, 30% Hispanic, 89.9% free and reduced lunch. So what we were doing is we were taking kids in poverty, and we were starting to SMART goal set with them. Okay, Mr. Murphy, you don't know how to do homonyms with mastery. So what I want you to do for the next 4 days is I want you to work on homonyms. I'm going to give you some stuff to do. And if you can pass a homonyms test with 8 out of 10 right, I'm going to celebrate your accomplishment. Okay, can you do that? Yes, I can do that. All right, not a problem. That's your homework for the next 4 days. You don't have the same random worksheet that everybody else is doing. You have to work on homonyms. That's your job. Mr. Presley, you don't know synonyms. And so we started to work intentionally with kids like that. We also built in the celebratory piece. So if a kid met their goal, they got to come down, see the principal or see somebody else, get a sticker that says, I'm a goal-getter. They got a little sheet of paper, went on the wall in the hallway. We called their parents. You know, hey, just want to call up, what did he do in school today? Nothing. He met a goal. You need to tell him, good job. He didn't do anything wrong? No. So we also flipped the coin on the parents because we started calling them for things that were good, not necessarily every time the child was in trouble. Also, we had a little treasure box. Kids got to go in and pick something out of Oriental Trading. You'd be surprised how hard a kid will work for a 29-cent rubber ball. Those kids discipline themselves hard. This is what we saw as a result of that. And I reference this in my professional portfolio. What happened at the end of 8 months is our lowest growth was 19 percentile points in 4th grade mathematics. Our highest growth was 36 percentile points in 3rd grade reading and language arts. Our special ed kids topped off the roof, as well as our ELL kids. So what happened? We made them feel good about their learning, and we gave them efficacy in what they were trying to do. We were teaching kindergarten students coming from poverty that you could learn your 220 sight words by Christmas break. Now what happens for a child in poverty? That they're taught to focus on today, but we're consequently teaching them to focus on tomorrow. We're rewriting their DNA according to poverty, and we're getting them to think about tomorrow. We're getting them to focus on middle-class skills that they need to be successful in life. So what did we do? We changed the entire culture of the school. There were parents that came down to look for their child's goal sheet on the wall, and I'd never seen them before, and I'd been there for 3 years. But they wanted to see their child's name on that wall. And it was a great time to have an opportunity for a conversation. Hey, yeah, look what Derek did. That's awesome. Man, you must really be working hard with him at school. Now we're investing in some of our parents in poverty and giving them positive experiences in life. We're rewriting that DNA. That's how I became a network lead principal in Nashville Public Schools. And then I was charged with helping do the exact same thing at 5 other schools. And I've got the data to show what happened the next year when I was helping 5 other schools do it. Every single indicator on their state summative assessment rose in every single school except for 1 school. Cole Elementary School, ELA, dropped 2 percentile points. But that's the only school. And I was working with some of the toughest schools in Nashville. Napier Elementary School, 100% free and reduced lunch. Schwab Elementary School, 98% free and reduced lunch. Every single school rose with proficiency on summative assessments.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Marzak,
Yes, sir.
as our new superintendent and leader of our great school district, how would you initially approach your new position?
Out of my seat and on my feet. I'm out of that. The office is nice, it's plush, I'm sure it's got a great chair. Mr. Reese could probably tell me. It's probably really comfortable. But being in that office is not where I want to be. Now, I know I'm going to have to be there from time to time, going back to if I get the job, do budget presentations, working with you guys. I'm going to have to be in the office from time to time. Where I'd rather be is interacting with people. Interacting with central office personnel. How's everything going? How's it going working with the principals? How's it going working with instructional technology? How's this going? You know what, I'm going to take off a little early for lunch. I'm going to take off 45 minutes. On my way to lunch, I'm stopping at a school. I'm walking in. I'm just walking around. Hey, how's it going? Principal, what do you need? What can I do for you? Teacher, what do you need? What can I do for you? That's one of the things I love to do, is I love to walk into a teacher's classroom and say, what do you need? And they look at me kind of funny. And I'm like, seriously, what do you need? Well, my Judy clock is broken. Okay, I'll get you one. 2 days later, a Judy clock comes in the mail. Talk about a way to build trust and really to make teachers feel good about what they're doing, is to get a teacher a Judy clock. And if you guys don't know what a Judy clock is, it's like a little clock that has hands and faces, and that's how they help kids tell time. Or walking into a high school teacher's classroom and go, what do you need? You know what, I kind of wish I had a clicker. That way I wouldn't have to keep walking to the front of the room to hit next, next, next on my PowerPoint. So I'll go back to my office and look at my executive assistant and say, hey, can you order so-and-so a clicker and have it sent to their classroom? I don't know those things are happening unless I talk to people. So I've got to get out and about. Sometimes it's dropping my kids off at school, and instead of dropping them off in the car line, parking and walking in. Giving them a kiss before they go in the classroom and walking around and talking to people or observing instruction. Spend about 20, 30 minutes and then boom, come on to central office. Or it's leaving a little bit early and dropping by one of the high schools. Popping on the sports field, watching the football team practice or watching the soccer team practice. Sometimes it's popping into orchestra. I have no musical talent whatsoever, but I know beautiful music when I hear it. And it's those types of activities where I don't just go back and forth between my office and home, office and home, office and home. It's getting into the classroom, it's observing instruction, it's talking to people, it's interacting with people, and asking them, what can I do for you? Thank you.
Mr. Presley?
You've touched on this a little bit with question 12. Hoover standards is excellence.
Woo! Yes, sir.
What would your plan be to keep those standards high and operate in a balanced budget?
Going back to the keys to college and career readiness, system-wide alignment, and then doing what we call student-based budgeting. So let's look at our keys. There's a key on there that we need to really work on because we're not doing very well as a system. So how do we align resources to help that key become successful? You've got to spend within your means, but you got to get people the tools that they need in order to maintain the high levels of academic success. And if everybody knows what you're budgeting for, then there's no hidden surprises. If one of our keys becomes industry certifications, then we've got to get out there and we've got to find some industry cert teachers. That could take some additional money and some additional resources. But what we're basically doing is saying we're putting resources in the school that the community wants. That's all we're doing. There's no hidden agenda. I'm not doing it because I want to do it. I'm not doing it because I think industry certification is great. I'm doing it because the community thought industry certification is what our kids needed. So as long as we have those clear, laid out agendas and nothing's hidden, it's not really adult-based decisions and adult-based drama. What we're talking about is giving the community what they wanted.
Mr. Cooper?
Another softball, you pretty much answered this question already to some extent anyway, but what are some of the ways you would be a visible figure within the community for students and parents alike? Clearly, we want to see involvement, participation in the community, not just sitting in the office.
Of course.
I mean, you talked about managing by walking around, and I got that, but let's extrapolate a little bit further out into the community, visibility, as the
Sure.
key representative for the school district.
Well, I'm currently a member of Rotary in Oak Ridge. So that's one of the big things that I do. I'm part of Sunset Rotary. I'm also a member of the Chamber of Commerce, so I frequently attend our weekly or our monthly Chamber of Commerce, what are called Sunshines. So I get to interact with members of the community and various business leaders. I get to interact with the mayor, city council members. I'm also sitting on a couple boards in Oak Ridge. So I recently just sat on the Methodist Medical Center Hospitality House fundraising board, where we raise money to provide kind of like a mini Ronald McDonald House in Oak Ridge for people that are at the Methodist Medical Center. So we reinvented their whole fundraising model. Consequently, had 50 less people show up, but we made $5,000 more money. That's because we reinvented it and breathed some new life into it. It was casino night, but it wasn't working really well. So we came up with a thing called In It to Win It. So we came up with 8 games, and people competed for prizes, doing challenges that wouldn't break a hip or cause anybody to break a femur. So worked out really well. We did good. So, but that's just one of the ways that I get out and about in the community and volunteer my time. I also, last year, one of the things I didn't allude to, I also ran with a child that's a 3rd grader at Linden for Girls on the Run. These are children that want to be more fit and active, but they come from homes of poverty. So she didn't have anybody to run with, so I ran with her. Because my wife and I are obstacle racers, I was like, sure, I'd love to run with Maria. She kicked my butt. Then the whole time, she didn't stop for nothing. I'm like, you don't want to stop, take a water break? She's like, nope. We talked about Disney World, we talked about everything. And she did really good. And I'd like to do Girls on the Run again this year. So those are just some various things that I do to get out and about and show my face.
Good for you.
Thanks. You're welcome.
Mr. Kelly?
Dr. Marzak?
Yes, sir.
Hoover expects and demands excellence in all the programs that we do. I know you already read this twice,
That's okay, not a problem.
but I've already said it one time, but how would you balance academics, fine arts, athletics, and all extracurricular activities to make sure all get the proper attention and emphasis?
I think it's less how you do it and you just do it. Because what we're really talking about is offering opportunities to students that are going to really kind of hone them in for life. If one of those kind of drops off, let's say, for example, we stop doing fine arts, either because we don't have the money or we don't have the time. You're leaving a whole gap of students that's one of their strengths is the fine arts, and you're really creating a disjointed model of adulthood. Just like we can't just leave academics out and just do fine arts, extracurricular activities, and sports. All of those things contribute to really the things that we remember and the things we loved about school. I doubt any of you can recall a great lesson from 5th grade, but I bet you could all recall a sports moment, or maybe you did drama, or maybe a club that you were in that you really had fun in, you really got to know some people and had a good time. So really what that does is that creates the whole model of really what we want to educate students here in Hoover City Schools. We don't want to put out disjointed kids that the minute they walk across the stage, they have no idea what they want to do in life. So some of the students want to be athletes. So how do we hone their skills in Hoover City to get them those opportunities? Some of our kids want to be in drama. They want to be in fine arts. They want to do plays. So how do we hone that here to get them the skills that they need when they walk out the door? Some of the kids want to go into academic fields or academic careers. Going back again, how do we hone that here and get them what they need to be successful? Now, one of the things I'm a big proponent of is that I want students, every single student, to belong to something. So that then goes to some of our high schools and middle schools to make sure that we have clubs and offerings for some of those kids that don't fit in some of those pegs. So we've really got to be creative in saying, so we've got about 25 or 30 kids that really don't fit anywhere. So what can we do to offer some things so that they do fit? What we had to do is we have to talk to those kids. We've got to pull them in and go, listen, we want you to really be happy here, and we want you to feel like you're involved and you belong. What can we do for you? What do you need? You know, I really wish we had an anime club. All right, let's fire up an anime club. You know, let's talk to our kids and ask them what they want, and let's see what we can do to get it for them. So kids have to belong, and all of these things you're talking about help kids belong.
Mr. Murphy?
Coming to question 5, would you consider a portion of your compensation package being tied to a mutual agreement upon stretch goals that define exceptional performance?
No. Next. No, kidding. Of course, yes. So, I caught you off guard, sorry about that. So, kind of like what I was talking about how I help people goal set, I do it myself as well. I set SMART goals for myself. So it's only natural that yes, I would expect that to be a part of my compensation. You want me to do things that are specifically that are going to grow not only my leadership potential but also the district. Yes, I would expect that. But I do have one caveat. I do have one thing that that is kind of like a no, it's kind of like a deal breaker if it doesn't happen. So what I think you're talking about is, let's say, for example, I set goals and we achieve those goals. Are you talking about compensation on top of what I currently earn? Kind of like a performance bonus? Is that what you're talking about?
I think we made that statement prior.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how it was set up.
So one of the things that I feel firmly about, that I kind of stand firm in, is in the same fiscal year, if teachers don't get raises, I don't expect a performance bonus. So if the people that I'm asking to really do the hard work to make an impact on all kids don't make more money, I don't expect more money either, even if I meet my goals. It's not fair. It's just not fair.
Let's talk a little bit about check and balance along those lines.
Sure, yes, sir.
The quantitative and measurable goals are pretty straightforward. They could be data driven. It could be ACT score of 27, you name it.
Yes, sir.
And there's certain ways of getting there, and you could be the steamroller, you could be the benevolent dictator, however you want to call that. So on the flip side of it, there would also probably be goals that are tied to stakeholder survey results.
Of course.
Students, teachers, community, whatever, based upon your performance and based upon their interaction with you and how they feel about you, because
Beautiful.
it would have to be designed to temper somebody who's just going for the gold, if you will.
Can you turn to the back of my portfolio?
I can.
What I've given in the back of my portfolio is a practice that I employ myself. Twice a year, I anonymously poll and survey the people that I've directly worked with. And I ask them specific questions around my own leadership. And it's anonymous, and it has to be anonymous. Because if you think that I can track it back, you're only going to tell me what I want to hear. You're not going to tell me what I need to know.
How many respondents?
Which one? I've got 2 different surveys in there.
I don't know, which gentleman each?
I'm not sure. I can give you the raw data if you'd like to see it.
No,
Well, I mean, out of the curriculum instruction team, which is about 18 people, and then I've got 9 principals, got about 30 people, I think I get about a 60 to 70% response rate. And what I do, well, first off, is I send the survey out. I ask for that anonymous feedback. When I'm done, I send them the raw results, and I thank them for taking their time to critically give me feedback. And then what I do is I promise them I'm going to make changes. I'm going to work on it. Because when you get feedback, you got 3 choices. You get upset, you can ignore it, or you can cry. Or, fourth one, you can change. So I like to say that I change based on the data. And you're not going to see all rosy stuff in there. There's some stuff in there. There's one in there I'll point out that says, I just don't feel that if I raise my voice that Dr. Marzak's going to hear me. And so what I've got to do is I've got to be more empathetic, and I've got to listen more to the people that I directly work with. It goes back to that whole listening piece. Because if even one person feels that way, I've got to look at what I'm doing and decide, do I want to continue down this path? And so that's what I do. So I would expect biannual feedback from the people that I directly work with to determine, am I doing a good job?
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Marzak, that
Yes, ma'am.
completes the questions for this evening. And I guess, well, we have one final question for you,
Yes.
and that is, do you have any questions for the board at this time?
Yes, I do. I have a couple of questions.
Shot.
So from each of you, if you would maybe start left to right, what do you love about this school system?
Which left?
That's not you, Ms.
I love
Fraser.
it, so I'll go first.
My left is a good point. Yes, ma'am.
Everything.
Everything. What do you
Everything.
mean everything? Like, what do you mean?
I have lived in Hoover for over 30 years.
Yes, ma'am.
I have 3 daughters that went through this school district. Oldest being 28, the middle one is 26 today, and the youngest one's 23. Hoover City Schools did everything and then some for my 3 daughters and their peers.
Beautiful.
And I totally agree with you that our goal, I believe, is to prepare these kids for the next level when they leave the 12th grade.
Yes, ma'am.
Because basically, if we're not doing our job, guess what? They move back in with mom and dad, and then we support them for the rest of their lives.
That's a good point.
So, I really and truly, my kids have been successful, and I can give you a list of kids that they went to school with that are doing amazing things throughout our country right now. They're not just, even though they may have started in Hoover City Schools,
Yeah.
they're all over the country right now. So I'm very positive where Hoover City Schools is concerned.
Beautiful, thank you. Mr. Murphy?
Diversity is one of the major things that, in our schools, we have 30 to 39 different countries represented,
Beautiful.
and that's an embrace. But I'll give you an example. I don't know the young lady's name, but excuse me, I feel like I'm coming down with a cold that Mr. Craig Keller probably gave me. So I'm stopped up here the entire time. But she wanted to increase participation in reading, and the amount of books that her students were reading in elementary school, and I forgot what grade.
Yeah.
So she had this idea to take a half of a trunk car, all right?
Mhm.
And she wanted to put it in her school. So he had Jeff Battles and his team, the maintenance guys, to bolt it to the wall. What she saw was, once they completed a task, they got to read in that trunk.
Nice.
So more and more kids
In the trunk.
in the trunk.
Climb in the trunk.
But it's
read
laid
a
off
book.
now, and that's closed now.
Yeah, that's all right. No, I get it. Okay. It's a little dark in there.
Yeah,
So,
it's a little dark
exactly.
in there.
I love it.
But increased reading, that every kid wanted to be a part of that. So our teachers are very innovative. They're very competitive.
Beautiful.
They're very competitive with different grade levels, but they share that competitiveness as well. And this is a very unified city. Anywhere from city leadership to all the different organizations that aid in scholarships.
Excellent.
From Hoover Rotary Club to Hoover Chambers of Commerce to the Hoover Foundation. They have different galas and programs to raise funds. Hoover is a great place to live in. And I tell you this, we're having a junior that's at Mr. Don Hewlin's high school right now, to a second grader, to a 2-year-old. I will be here a long time, God willing.
Beautiful.
So I've enjoyed it every step of the way, and we have some fantastic folks.
Beautiful. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Mr. Presley?
Without a doubt, the people being administrators, teachers, parents, the parental involvement that our schools have, the personal stake that our teachers take in our children.
Yeah.
The fact that if you go anywhere, there will be a lot of parents there watching their children, participating, whether it be a sporting event, whether it be a fine arts, whether it be a school board meeting. Parents are involved, our community's involved, and our teachers and our administrators are involved and take a huge interest in our students, and it makes all the difference in the world.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Cooper?
As if we're gonna run out of things. Talk about Mr. Murphy's comment on diversity. To me, the biggest part about diversity for kids here, it provides a real world experience.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, there's pristine environments other places that, it's okay, but that's not real world. And as you alluded to, the world is changing on a consistent basis. So
Yes, sir.
if you're not capable of assimilating into that, you've got some issues long haul. And typically our kids' issues become our issues. But the other thing I think too is our opportunities. There's clearly experiential learning. There's clearly classroom learning.
Mm-hmm.
That is all magnified by teachers, coaches, technology, and facilities.
Beautiful.
And when you've got that package going, and you're a kid coming into the school district, and you're a parent whose kid is coming here, you're probably going to have the same kind of experience to one degree or the other that Don and everybody else sitting at this table has had with our kids in this school district.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Mr. Kelly?
You may have to repeat the question, because I'm, like my partner here, one of the older people up here, so. We outdate Ms. Frazier by about 15 years.
What do you love about the Hoover system, sir?
Me.
Yeah. I hate to use the word "I," and I'm using it now.
That's all right.
Okay. Yeah, like Ms. Frazier and all of us up here, I have 3 kids that have gone through the Hoover system, 2 at
Beautiful.
Auburn University right now. How could you live in a city like this and not love it and want to help?
Beautiful.
Just continue to enjoy it. Hope I have grandkids here. I've just been blessed with the opportunity to try to participate and learn and give something back.
You alluded to something a while ago about the growth and all, and you talked about aspirations for 27 and ACT and all
Yes,
that
sir.
stuff. Another key point that nobody really addresses has been our ability to adapt and to adjust to changing circumstances.
Beautiful.
Our exponential growth, the question of state funding levels, from 08, 09, I mean, it just, there's so many variables in any school district, but when you have exponential growth like we've had, to be able to adapt and adjust and assimilate, and still end up where we are as good as we are, it's remarkable. And you said that yourself, Brother Irvin.
Well, and I think it goes back to what Mr. Preston was saying to people.
Right.
If
Exactly.
you don't have good
Exactly.
people that can adjust to those tidal waves, then you're in a tough situation. You're in dire straits.
There has to be people at every level.
Yes.
It
True.
can't be the board, it can't be the superintendent, it can't be the central office staff, it's gotta be at every level, and it is.
You're exactly right. Perfect. Last question. What's the one thing I need to know if I'm offered the job and accept?
But stay in shape.
Not a problem. Done.
Also, I'll go back to what I
I'll
said.
go
earlier.
first.
Go ahead.
Madam Chairwoman?
We expect excellence in this school district, and we are not gonna settle.
Mr. Murphy?
Didn't come to mind, I was thinking.
Oh, no, I didn't.
You can phone a friend. We can come back. It's okay.
Do you need Mr. Hewlin's help on this?
Cash gap.
Well, I have to say the same thing Ms. Frazier said. I mean, you know, the goal here is not to sell.
Yes, sir.
We have a very dynamic system. You know, when comparing it, we talked about earlier being a top school
Yes, sir.
in the state.
Yes, sir.
We have some dynamics here that I feel like we're already top school in the state.
I love it.
Just because it's not on radio, on, in a magazine or in a newspaper. Highlighting those great strengths, where every time you turn, whatever state you go to, I mean, someone, I think the head track coach came here, he got presented when he just left from California from a meet, and he already knew who Hoover was in California.
Beautiful.
That's what I care about. I care about that portion of it. Talking about the greatness that we have. Now, if we get number one along the way, that's fine. It's always great to get that as well. But known in the nation is what I care about.
Thank you.
Very simple, one word, as Ms. Frazier said, excellence,
Beautiful.
period.
Nothing less.
Mr. Cooper, are you gonna go with one word?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
You do it. Yeah, the thing about it is, I mean, I said it before. Everything that you discussed and done has been very hands-on. We're gonna be expecting a servant leader. And within that servant leadership, with management, of course, but you're not gonna be able to, and it's not gonna be fair to everybody who's working for you to be hands-on. So, we're looking for the leadership role, not the doer role.
Wouldn't be here if I couldn't do it.
Just making sure we're clear.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Kelly?
Honesty and integrity, and that's echoing some of the stakeholder surveys we did, what they thought was important to them.
Yes.
I'm doing this because the microphone's got feedback, sorry.
It's okay, not a problem.
Okay, that is very, very important, being able to hit the ground and understand that you're working for our stakeholders, our children, number one, our community, and your character seems non-questioned here, so.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, sir. Thank you. Do you have any other questions for me? Is there anything else you want to know that's not on the sheets?
Where
We
did you
have
get
a
your
lot.
socks from?
Oh, where did I get my socks from? Macy's.
Did you get it from Hoover?
No, I've had them, but I got my bow tie at Hoover today.
Before you leave, get a pair of socks and bow tie. So
Deal.
Yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome. Not a problem.
I think that's all for now. We're gonna give you just about a 25-minute break, if that's okay.
I'm good to go. I don't need a
Okay.
break. I'm ready to go.
Well, we do.
Okay, gotcha. Good point. Good point. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I know a lot of people applied for this job, and I'm honored just to be able to come to drive from Oak Ridge today just to kind of talk a little bit about myself. So I just wanted to say thank you. and I hope I get the opportunity to serve your district.
You did a good job.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. There will be a reception upstairs at 7:30 in the technology room. And everyone's welcome to come.
I'm saying tonight, I'm here. Yes, sir.